Really what I wanted to challenge and what I wanted to talk about today is the difference between data visualization and visual analytics, and a few tips from the road as to what we've learned over the last, well, what I've learned over the last 10 years of working at Tableau and with Tableau customers in terms of what's the best practice to make sure that everybody benefits from an investment in technology like Tableau. So first thing to say is that visual analytics is not visualization. Visual analytics is a more advanced practice, and it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be more technically capable or skilled. It just means that you get more juice out of the orange. From my perspective, data visualization occurs when we already know the story we want to tell. Either we've hard coded it or we know from gut instinct. And we want to be able to tell that story visually because that's how humans understand things. A bunch of research that is regularly cited in this conversation around pre-attentive attributes and the way your brain works, and how the length of a bar is easier to recognize than a couple of numbers or characters in a big grid of numbers. So visualization as a practice doesn't need to go away. It's still really important to tell stories and analyze things visually. But visual analytics is the practice of exploring that data visually, rather than just having to know the answer as you go in or have an inkling as you go in. That ability to approach a data set with a very broad problem or no problem at all and go see what information you can find doesn't taint or color that analysis. You're actually experiencing that data and exploring that data and generating deeper insights just purely by the fact that you don't need to have any particular technical skill or knowledge to explore it. In fact, more valuable than previous use of the data or previous understanding of the scenario is subject matter expertise as to what you're trying to find out, and broader questions rather than I need to know which product performed best in France. More broad question would be, what's my best product? You then have to define a bunch of parameters, and you can do that on the fly if you're analyzing that visually rather than doing analysis in an old-fashioned way and then telling the story based on what you found as you've gone along. Things will jump out at you, things will jump off the page. I wanted to take a second to just talk a little bit about my experience, because I did a international business degree at university and then did a couple of little jobs and eventually fell into a role at Tableau in February 2012. So I joined that company knowing very little about data, the history of data, how it's been used, anything around analytics, creative design, visual analytics, visualization, and learned everything kind of from scratch. And the first dashboard that I actually was I got a bunch of data that I had to manually type. I didn't know anything about scraping. I'd manually typed all the scores for League 2 football, for how my football team broke to, and try to influence any sports betting I was going to do or any predictions I was going to do in fantasy football and with my friends. I had a dashboard that I could use. It wasn't particularly functional, it wasn't particularly beautiful, but that was my first foray into non-fiction when it comes to analytics. We learned a bunch of demos at Tableau that were kind of pre-canned and forced. It was my first time to go and experience the joy of understanding data without any preconceptions. And what I learned during that process was visual analytics is more powerful than just visualization. My first time actually using it in a work scenario was building dashboards, not just to work out whether I was going to hit my target in sales, but also was I hitting other key metrics and KPIs in terms of number of connections and number of calls and number of people that I'd spoken to and lead SLAs and things like that. I worked for Tableau and they had dashboards that performed that task. But from my perspective, I had a very specific way I wanted to look at it. And from my personal approach, I found that being able to build my own dashboard made me more performant and made me more effective. When you create a dashboard that's to be consumed by the masses, you have to make sure it's consumable by the masses, and therefore you forego some personalizations that individuals might want for the benefit of simplicity and scalability. So I started to rebuild some things that already existed. I then built something that didn't exist at all, which was sales flashes. We had regular emails would go out saying, this thing's happened today, this thing's just happened in the last 5 minutes. And over time, when these things became more regular, those sales flashes were very difficult to consume. So I built a dashboard that would consolidate all of the sales flashes for the day and present it to me in a visual, easy to understand fashion. That wasn't a dashboard that was for deep exploration, but it was to simplify a process that was getting overwhelming. From then on, I started to build things like pipeline management dashboards to understand what an entire sales team is doing, and dashboards that that are going to help us with next year's budget planning now that we're running Biztory. And the point that I'm trying to make here is not that I'm a genius, it's actually quite the opposite. It's that through being in an organization, an environment that prioritized everyone having access to data, I was able to find things and find efficiencies and be more performant in my role purely on the basis that I had access to technology and data. I didn't come pre-ordained and pre-able to go and do this analysis. I learned on the job, and that environment is key. Not the person. The person brings subject matter expertise, personal preference, experience and knowledge, but the environment is key for that self-driven analytics and data democratization to thrive. I just want to pause for a second and talk about human data stories. This is what we at Biztory try and do, and it's kind of at the core of what I'm talking about today. The core is that data is very valuable, and everybody talks about data is the new gold, data is the new oil, data is the new water, data is the new sand. It's kind of a overrun idea, but data is very valuable. It only becomes more valuable when humans get to interact with it. In isolation, if it's the end of the world and there's just one person left surviving, that data is completely invaluable or valueless. When humans start to interact with data and drive their decisions and drive their knowledge using information, they become more capable, they become more efficient, and that's really, really well documented through dozens and dozens and hundreds of studies. The core for us is the stories. When humans can use data to tell stories, we end up in a position, in a scenario where those outputs are synergized. We get more and more and more levels of value and levels of detail and deeper insight when a human brings their subject matter expertise and their point in time understanding of what's going on, that they can then go tell that story to more humans. And data there is a catalyst for better decisions and better actions for humans, and humans tell stories. So through the technologies that we work with, we like to think that we enable humans to tell better stories using data. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is very much that. How do you build an insights-driven organization? How do you help the humans in your organization to leverage data and tell better stories so they make better decisions and drive better actions? So this is some research that I found from Deloitte that looks at what is an insights-driven organization. It's very difficult for us to define right now. If you're head of data or head of analytics or head of HR or whatever business role you're in, you'll often hear people say, we want to be more insights driven, we want to be more data driven, we want to have a data culture, we want to democratize data. And these are all very noble pursuits, but that soundbite that you can say in an annual plan or a team meeting or we want to do this, doesn't become a thing unless you're able to plan, unless you're able to compartmentalize, unless you're able to kind of invest and progress. So one thing that I find companies find incredibly distracting is understanding what it really means to be an insights-driven organization. And I find this research to be particularly valuable in helping companies to define what they mean when they say they want to be insights-driven. Now, before I get through this, it's not to say that if you're a level 1, you're a pariah, and if you're a level 5, you're a saint. Some companies don't need to get beyond a certain level based on their size, based on the thing they do. And it's not to say that getting further along the spectrum is the right thing to do. The point of this exercise is to work out where you are, what your current state is, and where you want to be, what your future state should be. So for some organizations, impaired analytics, in all intents and purposes, impaired analytics is not really where you want to be. But for some organizations, having very light touch analytics that kind of informs some decisions, but really it's a gut instinct thing, could be valuable and the right way to be. And actually, for most organizations that I've dealt with, they would put themselves at a 1.5 to a 2.5. Those who are being overly critical or in some circumstances overly honest would put themselves at a 1.5 and say, we want to do better, but honestly, business as usual gets in the way. So analytics is a nice to have. And often what we're doing is we're using analysis to retrospectively prove that decisions we've made were the right decisions. The next step is localized, and this is where I see a lot of organizations where certain business units or departments or individuals have got access to data and technology that helps them to be more analytical, or you have a team that's designed that specifically does your analysis, and that's quite a valuable thing to have set up, but it's not necessarily how all organizations can get value. You end up with a bottleneck there of the few serving the many. So moving then towards aspirational, where you're starting to do more ad hoc, you're not reacting to we need this information yesterday. You've automated some of that process, and you've got capacity to develop the reactive stuff that you then have extra bandwidth to do proactive stuff. And this is still somewhat siloed and still somewhat bottlenecked, but we've invested to the point that people are able to self-serve to an extent, and those who are doing the coal-face work of building dashboards and building competencies have the bandwidth to go and do not just reactive but proactive work. Being analytical means that you don't have that sort of centralized, this is where our data comes from, this is where our insights come from. You have a bunch of different pods around an organization or individuals around an organization who are able to be analytical, not just in terms of having the skills, capacity, access, and technology, but they also have the bandwidth to do it and the need and desire to do it. That's the hardest bit, I think, for most organizations, is to sort of train people or teach people or open people up to the idea of being analytical because they would benefit from it. Not because it's part of their job, but because, wow, if I could just do this, I would be this much more effective. Final stage is insights driven, and obviously you can expect everyone kind of thinks, well, that's where I want to get to, but transformational analytics is hard. If it was easy, everybody would be doing it. And to have that transcend all lines of business in an organization, as the organization gets bigger, it becomes more difficult. As it gets smaller, it becomes more expensive because you don't have the economies of scale. So how you do this it's very important. If you do want to be a totally insights driven organization, you need to be smart about where the money goes and where the resources go, because those are the most difficult things to balance. So Tableau recently worked with YouGov to do some polling of 1,000 data leaders and general leaders in Europe. And the positive news is that 92% of those leaders think it is important for data to be accessed to all. The reason I like this statistic is it's not data's brilliant, we should use it more. It's everybody should at some point in their day use data to make decisions and to drive processes forward and create efficiencies and all that great stuff that we all know data does for us. The downside is that only 47% of those people polled actually give data to the subject matter experts to fuel that decision making. And in fact, 83% of people, the leaders in these businesses that were polled across Europe, don't make data culture a priority. Now, you could extrapolate from that, is it because they don't want to, because they don't see value? Well, no, because 92% of people think it's important that we have a data culture and that data culture be pervasive. But 83% of people not doing it means it's difficult, it's complex, it's hard to understand, it's not been done very well in places I've worked before, therefore I don't have a blueprint for how to do it properly here. And it's one of those things that is a nice to have for a lot of organizations because it's so difficult, because it's so complex, because it's not a path that's been that well trodden. So the best part about this research document, which I'll send around afterwards, is that actually it talks about some really key words here: empowerment, and uncertainty, accuracy, focus, and most importantly, trust. What data builds is trust and confidence that we're doing the right things. We're making good decisions, we're moving our business forward. That is vital, and that's why we do it. So I wanted to share a couple of examples of companies that we've worked with and companies that we're aware of who do feel as though they're ready to scale analytics. We did some work with Zoopla at the start of last year, understanding what their analytics practice looked like and what they wanted it to look like in the next 3 to 5 years. And in the last 9 months, we've been able to grow, well, Zoopla have been able to grow their total number of users to 500, and the goal is to get everybody in Zoopla using Tableau, because there's benefit to pervasive use of dashboarding. We've done work with Secret Escapes for the last couple of years, but in the last 12 months, we've gone from a pocket full of people in that sort of siloed data analytics team to every single employee at Secret Escapes having access to dashboards and technology that enable them to be more self-serving. The beauty of Secret Escapes is they already had relatively good analytics, but it was only accessible to the few people who could write the code or understand the data structures themselves. What they've done with Tableau is democratize that, and both products still work. It's not that they've said, here's the one size fits all solution. They have multiple different solutions for multiple different lines of business and different user types and different preferences even. Some of my favorite stories that I've heard over the last 10 years are things like an intern who discovered $300 million of billing errors in a fizzy pop manufacturer. A company, automotive company that found £10,000 worth of efficiencies every month. Someone on the assembly line found that. This isn't an analyst, this is an accidental analyst. Pharmaceutical company that decided, why don't we train all our clinicians to be data people as well? And over 3 years took thousands of people through not just here's how technology works, but here's how to be analytical and build a community of practice that really supports that. The line at the top, 8% of companies believe they're able to scale analytics. It comes from I think it was McKinsey survey from maybe 3 years ago. That number may have changed, but from what I understand, about 8% of companies genuinely believe that they're able to scale analysis. Not that they have analysis, but to get up to that 4 or 5 out of 10 on an insights-driven organization. So we spent some time recently trying to document or at least understand how to build a data culture, because it's not as simple as get clean data, use tool that can help everybody access and understand that data, do some training. There's a lot of different things that need to take place, and it is a culture shift. It's not just a case of let's implement some new technologies and policies and make more stuff available and it'll sort itself out. A lot of it is around the nuance and the personnel and the sort of the direction of travel that needs to start at the very, very beginning, and it's a cyclical thing. You get better and better and better, and it is a virtuous cycle. The more you see change, the better you get at things. So it goes 1 to 5. It's not necessarily a 1 to 5 situation, but for me, it all starts with change. Are we going to do this? Are we going to have a data culture? Is this something that we all around the table that are making this choice to give data and visual analytics to everybody are ready to do? And if so, what are our objectives? How are we going to make sure this happens? And how comfortable are we with failure and risk and all the things that come with, oh my God, we've not done this before? Because as we discovered earlier, it is complex, it is difficult, it is a new path. So being comfortable with that change is the very, very first step. And at a leadership level, it's important that you show comfort with that change and you create an environment that people are understanding change is coming and it's a good thing. The next thing is trust. You need to create an environment of trust that there will be a certain amount of risk, there will be a certain amount of failure, and that you make sure people become comfortable with this idea that data is going to drive our decision making. You also need to develop trust in the data itself. A lot of companies will have had historic lack of trust with data because the system didn't work particularly well, or you were usually working off old data, which meant that they weren't necessarily the most perfect decisions. But building trust in data and building trust in using data is actually quite difficult to do. If you're smart about how you approach this topic, you will have a team of people, a center of practice or a center of excellence of people who are the trusted advisors, but it needs to go beyond that. It needs to be pervasive around the organization. Otherwise, you end up with that very same bottleneck of those are the people we trust. Let's just leave it with them. You need to open up that trust and accept that failure and risk. The next thing to do is develop. You need to start moving. So accepting change and trusting that the ends justify the means is one thing, but actually making a start is also very difficult because a lot of companies and a lot of people, their experience is the report lands on my desk on a Tuesday. Changing that mindset to, I need this information, it's live now, it's available now, I can access it here. I need some information that doesn't currently exist or I haven't seen before, and developing those skills and developing that knowledge is difficult. And setting that baseline of here's the gold standard dashboards is one thing, but then setting that baseline of If you need something else, don't just ring the person you've rung for the last 5 years. Here's some technology that will help you. Here's a training program that will get you to where you need to be. Here's 3 examples of where this has been done well. And developing that collateral and that infrastructure is really, really important. Not to mention the subject matter experts to actually deliver it. This is a huge component of it. Learning is not just, here's the button on Tableau server that helps you connect to this data source, or here's what happens when I drag this here, or here's how to build a bar chart. It's the functional stuff is a no-brainer. You have to do the functional learning. But we also need to learn how to be analytical, how to ask analytical questions, how to solve problems, and things that aren't quite as obvious as the example I gave earlier. Which customer buys which car most likely. It's quite simple. You could build a pivot table to answer that, but why do they buy that car? Which cars should we build more of? Is that because people are more likely to buy it? Is that because we can develop them cheaper and there's economies of scale? Like those broader questions, we need to teach people how to compartmentalize broad questions and answer them analytically. And don't typecast people. It's really easy to say that this person is in leadership, therefore they deserve more power or control, or this person is in IT, therefore we'll get them to do more of this and that. What you'll find is that within your data society or analytics society, that there will be people that surprise you, and that's the whole point of building a data culture, is that if we stick with the status quo and we stick with the typecasting that we're doing, we'll get the same results. It's about empowering those people with opportunities to learn and opportunities to develop, and being patient with them. It doesn't happen overnight, and you have to build an infrastructure that grows with the people and develops with the people. Final thing is empowerment. You got to celebrate success. You got to create opportunities for development, create opportunities for learning. You've got to go and explore the dark alleyways of, well, we've not done this before, let's try and make it work, and take things further, and that then brings more change, and that's why we see this as being relatively cyclical. So let's talk about people. I've just talked about typecasting people. The way that people look at, well, historically I've looked at analytics, and certainly in my experience working with hundreds of organizations in the UK, is that you have analysts and you have everybody else. Everybody else gets a report on a schedule, or if they're lucky, they get access to some data in Excel that they can fiddle with. But if you typecast your people, you won't be able to reap the benefits of giving data to everybody, of giving analytics to everybody. And one of the beauties of Tableau is that technology enables multiple tiers of analysts. So there's the classical analyst. I'm going to make sure the data is clean. I'm going to ask the top 20 burning questions. I'm going to answer the known unknowns, the things I know you need to know. I'm going to build that suite of dashboards so that you can have access to the information that you need. In a analytics for all scenario, when we give everybody access to visual analytics, that person takes on a second role, which is we build the bog standard, we build the minimum viable product and the expectation level. But what we also do is we help everybody else to level up and get better and try new things. And the accidental analyst is what you're hoping for. The accidental analyst is the person that finds that £10,000 a month in savings, or that 300 million in billing errors that we can go and rectify. Those are the people that aren't analysts, but if you give them data and you give them time and you give them support, might go find something really cool. And it's not necessarily a cost or a saving. They might suggest, okay, why don't we open a new store in this location? Or why don't we try and get into this line of business? Or what a lot of people are doing at the moment, and we're running a webinar next week on, is embedded analytics. I use this dashboard every day. I feel like my customers would benefit from this. What if we did it this way? By turning people on to the power of data, they will make very, very interesting decisions and interesting ideas, because they're taking things from another perspective. The next level is a hobbyist analyst. Not necessarily the case that you have to become an analyst, but maybe you want to have the opportunity to fiddle and poke and tool about. There's a bunch of people in an organization that can be relatively reactive, but the times in which they're proactive can add the same amount of value as an accidental analyst. Final person is the occasional analyst. It's not to say that everybody should become an analyst. Some people just need those reports, and that's fine. Some people need a report that gives them what we think they need to see, but the opportunity to go and explore other areas if they want to. These tiers, and this is kind of almost a grouping of the 4 that we can most regularly see, but the point we're trying to make is that if your organization has 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 individuals, each individual's relationship with data will be different. And you should look beyond the SKUs that you buy from a vendor and try and build these profiles of individuals that you want to try and target to make sure you're getting that return on investment. Because at the very beginning, we talked about resources, people and time, and money. You can spend a lot of money on licenses, but if you're not enabling or creating that environment, it will be a waste of time and money. If you expect your resources to all come from a small pool, it will be a waste of those resources. So I guess in summary, the idea of visual analytics for everybody is a challenging topic. It's not for everybody. It's not something that everybody wants to adopt straight away. But if you think in the next 2 to 3 years that's something that you want to do, you can start planning now, because it's not a case of let's make a call now and spend 3 years and a ton of money and time building an ecosystem for better analytics. You can take baby steps now. But what tends to benefit companies is to think, in 3 years, I would like to be in a situation where somebody comes to me and says, guess what I just found? How do we get there? And what this presentation hopefully demystified somewhat is, how do we get there? How do we compartmentalize the steps we need to take to go there? Now, Biztory has a bunch of experience, and we do a lot of management consulting around how do we set a data strategy, how do we build a data culture. But to all intents and purposes, there's a bunch of blueprints on the open market that you can go use to decide how do we get there. So I just wanted to take a quick second to plug a couple more events that we're running. Hopefully this was valuable. You will get the recording. If you think there are other people need to see this, you can either send them the recording or you can get in touch with us at sales@biztory.com. We'd be more than happy to run this privately. It's usually better as a Q&A anyway, because we're putting some challenging concepts out there. It's fun to say, that wouldn't work for this reason, or that's interesting. Can you tell me more on this topic? Have you seen this happen before? So all of these sessions that we're running, I'm happy to set people up to run individually for your organization. But on Tuesday next week, our founder, Geoffrey Smulders, will talk about one of our secret sources, which is customer-facing analytics. How do we take all the things we know, the IP we've developed, the answers we've found for ourselves, and surface that to customers? How do we make our customers as successful with data as ourselves? And that's an investment that we're seeing more and more companies pick up. I would say we spend almost half of our time now helping people to deploy analytics as a service, customer-facing analytics, either because they want to generate more revenue, or they want to generate more stickiness, or they want to expand into new areas. There's a bunch of reasons you do it. Geoffrey's going to run through how to monetize your data with your customers on Tuesday. On Thursday, Luke, one of our commercial leaders in the UK, is going to be running through what a modern data stack is and what it means to use the modern data stack. That's talking beyond just my data's clean, how do I do visual analytics? How do I empower my people to be more analytical? It's what happens before that. How do I make sure that I'm not just connecting to individual silos and pools of data, but that my data comes from every source I have? With the proliferation of web apps, it's very difficult to make sure all your data is in one place and then transform it to a point that it's ready for analytics. So that modern data stack session will be really interesting for anyone who has data and a passion for analysis, but it's not clean, it's not ready, and actually an analytics data warehouse or access to more data would be beneficial. There's some cool concepts in there. I would definitely recommend it. But for me, that was half an hour. Hopefully it was a half an hour well spent. If anybody has any queries or questions, email me, joe.clark@biztory.com, or email sales@biztory.com. We'd love to work with anybody who wants to work with us. We've got some cool ideas, some cool concepts. We've been doing this for a long time. Even if it's just, how would you approach this situation? We're always interested to hear from people. So please do feel free to get in touch. I'm going to open it up to Q&A. If anybody does have any questions they want to ask, or specific topics they want to discuss, please put it in the chat or ask questions. Happy to set up additional sessions with people, whatever is required. But please ask questions in the chat. I'll stick around for 5 minutes and then I'll let everybody go. Okay, someone's asked whether it's going to be recorded. Yeah, this has been recorded. We will send this out to everybody. I think there may well have been a couple of attendees that dropped at the start because of the technical issues. So if there's people you know in your organization that were planning on attending and dropped off, please feel free to share it around. It'll be on our website and we will email it to everyone on the registration list anyway. But I guess the knock on to that is the recording's great. An in-person version of this is better, either virtually or in your offices. This is something you genuinely want to go and do. It's fun to sit down and just knock it around the room a little bit. So please do get in touch if that's something that's interesting to you. Good question here on Tableau explorers versus Tableau viewers. So for those who aren't aware, Tableau breaks down their licensing as creators, explorers, and viewers. And part of the reason that we talk about different types of analysts is that what a lot of people see when they see creators, explorers, and viewers is creators are my builders and viewers are my viewers. What's an explorer for? I could sit here and talk for 15, 20 minutes about what I love about explorer features and the value that unlocks. But the edited highlights are, as an explorer, you have the ability to explore the unknown unknowns, the things you don't know much more succinctly and much more smoothly, without needing to go and download software or ask for data or hard code things yourself. Just in the browser, you can take a dashboard another step forward or ask something disposable, or you can create something completely from scratch with a pre-curated data source. That unlocking that ability for more people, I would say you'd be surprised how much value that comes from that. So I'll send you a message directly if you want to go into more detail on that. But for me, Explorers is the future. It's the reason you should buy Tableau. If you see yourself buying 5% of your users are creators and 95% of your users are viewers, chances are you're not getting all the benefit from Tableau that you could be, and therefore there could be a more cost-effective solution out there. It's not to say go buy something else, it's to say let's explore what you could be doing to add more return on investment. It might cost you a little bit more money, but your return on investment will be significantly higher. Thank you for the question. I think that's the only question that we had. If anyone has anything specific, again, joe.clark@biztory.com and sales@biztory.com, always available. You can book meetings with us on our website. We'd love to hear from you. But for now, I think that's the end of the questions. So I am going to jump off. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Appreciate it.